There are moments in the lives of elephants that seem to slow the world around them. A herd stops. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but with a kind of weight that changes the air. One elephant steps forward. Her trunk reaches toward the body on the ground. She touches it, withdraws, touches it again. For us, scenes like this are almost impossible to watch without reaching for human words. Grief, mourning, a funeral, love. But if we begin with those words, we may begin too late. Because before we ask what an elephant feels in the presence of death, we have to ask something deeper. What kind of world does an elephant live in? What does presence feel like to a mind that is not human? What does absence feel like? And what happens when a life that once moved, called, touched, answered, becomes still? This film is about elephants. But more than that, it is about a form of intelligence that begins before thought, in perception, in contact, in the way a body receives the world before the mind has words for it. To understand the elephant, we have to begin lower than the brain, lower than the eyes, even lower than the ears, at the feet, at the ground, at the possibility that for an elephant, the earth is not only something to stand on, it is part of the conversation. To us, the ground often feels silent. It is what we cross, what we build on, what holds our weight without asking to be noticed. But for an elephant, the ground may be something more. Elephants live partly in a world of low frequencies. They produce deep rumbles, some at frequencies near or below the lower edge of human hearing. These sounds can travel through the air, and part of their energy can move through the ground as vibration. That matters because an elephant is built to notice what we miss. Its feet are not only massive structures for carrying weight, they are sensitive. The soles contain vibration-sensitive receptors. The trunk, especially near its tip, is also extraordinarily sensitive to touch and vibration. So a message from another elephant may not arrive only through the ear. It may arrive through the body, as pressure, as tremor, as a faint movement in the earth. Imagine that for a moment. A companion is far away, too far to see, maybe too far for a human to hear, but not entirely gone, not yet out of contact. Some trace of that presence may still travel through the ground. This is where elephant intelligence begins to look different from ours. Not because elephants are magical, because their world gives them different information. We look across the savannah and see distance. An elephant may feel connection. We hear silence. An elephant may be receiving a signal. And once you understand that, the question changes. It is no longer only how intelligent is an elephant. It becomes, what kind of reality is elephant intelligence built from? Because intelligence does not begin only when an animal solves a problem. It begins earlier, with what the animal can notice, with what the body can separate from the noise, with what the world is allowed to become inside the nervous system. For an elephant, part of that world comes through the ground. A vibration is not yet language. A rumble is not yet thought. For a signal to become meaningful, it has to carry difference. This sound, not that one. This direction. This urgency. This individual. A call can say many things. Come closer. Stay together. There is danger. I am here. But one of the most remarkable things a call can do is become an address. Not simply a sound sent into the world, a sound meant for someone. In recent research on wild African elephants, scientists found evidence that elephants use individually specific, name-like calls. This does not mean elephant language is human language. It does not mean we can translate their world into ours. But it does suggest something extraordinary. An elephant may be able to call another elephant as a particular individual, not just as a member of the herd, not just as a body nearby, but as this one, a known other. What makes this especially striking is that these calls do not seem to work simply by copying the receiver's own voice. They appear to function more like learned vocal labels, a sound associated with a specific individual. That is a different kind of social world. A world where communication is not only general, not only emotional, not only collective, but directed, specific, relational. A low rumble moves through air. Part of it may travel through the ground. And somewhere inside that sound, there may be enough information for one elephant to know, this call is for me. That is not a small thing. Because once a species can address individuals, its world becomes more detailed. Certain others matter. Certain voices matter. Certain presences are not interchangeable. And this is where the story quietly turns. Because if a living presence can be recognized, then its absence can also become meaningful. Not as an abstract idea, not as a philosophy, but as a change in the known pattern of the world. People often say elephants have good memories. It is true. But the phrase is too small. It makes memory sound like a talent, a charming fact, something impressive but separate from the animal's life. For elephants, memory is not decoration. It is infrastructure. A long-lived animal moving through vast landscapes cannot treat the world as new every morning. It has to remember where water was found, where danger appeared, which routes were safe, which calls mattered, which individuals belonged, which ones had been absent too long. Memory, for an elephant, is not only a record of the past, it is a living map. A map of land, a map of bodies, a map of relationships, a map of signals that once meant something and may mean something again. This is not the kind of intelligence that flashes. It is not quick cleverness, not a trick performed for us. It is slower, older, more accumulative. The intelligence of a life that has had time to layer experience upon experience. A path remembered. A voice remembered. A smell remembered. A body remembered. And this matters because loss can only be deep when recognition came first. Something cannot be absent in a meaningful way unless it was once known. So before we speak about elephants and death, we have to understand this. An elephant does not live in a world of anonymous movement. It lives in a world of remembered presences. This is the part of the story where we have to be most careful, because elephants invite human emotion. We see a trunk touching a body, a herd standing still, a mother remaining near a calf. And we want to name what we see. But a responsible story does not need to turn an elephant into a human being in order to respect it. The facts are already powerful enough. Researchers and field observers have documented elephants approaching the bodies and bones of dead elephants. They touch them, smell them, investigate them with the trunk. They may linger. They may return. They often show interest in the skull, tusks, and other remains. In some observations, elephants have tried to lift or support a fallen individual. In others, they have stood near a body for long periods. Science can describe these behaviors. It can compare them, count them, ask when they happen, how often, and in what context. But science cannot directly translate an elephant's inner life into human language. So we should not pretend to know exactly what an elephant feels. Instead, we can ask a better question. What would death mean to an animal whose social world is built from known individuals? What would it mean to an animal that may receive the living presence of others through low sound, vibration, smell, touch, and memory? A body remains. The tusks remain. The bones remain. The smell may remain. But something else has stopped. The steps, the rumble, the response, the living pattern by which that individual once entered the world of others. For an elephant, absence may not be only visual. It may not be only the sight of a body that no longer moves. It may be more embodied than that. A familiar signal no longer arriving. A known presence no longer answering. The earth still carries sound, but not that sound. This is why the phrase at the heart of the film matters. The earth as language. Silence as loss. Not because we are adding poetry to science, but because the science leads us toward a kind of silence we cannot fully hear. At this point, someone might ask, is this really intelligence? Or is it emotion? But in living animals, those things are not always easy to separate. Intelligence is not only solving a puzzle, not only using a tool, not only passing a test made by humans. Intelligence is the ability to build a meaningful world from perception, to notice what matters, to separate signal from noise, to recognize individuals, to remember them across time, to respond when the world has changed. By that measure, elephant intelligence is not simply large. It is deeply relational. It begins in the body, in feet and trunk sensitive enough to receive vibration. It extends into communication, in low calls that may travel farther than our ears can comfortably follow. It becomes social, in the ability to distinguish individuals. It becomes memory, in long histories of land, kinship, danger, and return. And then, at its most difficult edge, it meets absence. Not absence in general, a specific absence. Someone who once answered no longer does. Someone whose signal once belonged to the world is no longer moving through it. That is not sentimentality. It is structure. A mind that recognizes presence may also register its loss. A mind built through connection may change when connection breaks. This is why elephants move us so deeply. Not because they are simply gentle, not because they are symbols of wisdom, but because their intelligence seems built around contact, around continuity, around the slow preservation of a world made of others. Across this series, one idea keeps returning in different forms. Intelligence is not a single ladder. It does not always look like human language, or tools, or strategy, or the kind of cleverness we most easily recognize. Sometimes, intelligence appears as culture, sometimes as solitude, sometimes as social memory, pressure, or rhythm. The elephant offers another form: intelligence as resonance, as a mind shaped by low frequencies, long memory, and a body that can listen through the ground. That is why the elephant belongs here, not as another example of a smart animal, but as a reminder that thought does not begin in the same place for every species. For us, the world often begins with sight. For an elephant, part of the world may begin as vibration, as contact, as a presence felt before it is seen. And that changes what intelligence can be. It is not only what happens inside the skull, it is what happens between body and world, between one individual and another, between signal and meaning, between presence and silence. So we return to the image we began with: an elephant beside the dead, a trunk reaching down, a pause, a body that remains, a signal that does not. We still do not know exactly what an elephant understands in that moment. A good film should leave some mystery intact. But we know enough to see the scene differently. We are not watching a random gesture. We are watching a mind shaped for recognition, a body shaped for reception, a life built around signals, memory, and connection. And perhaps that is why elephants feel so close to us, even while living in a world we cannot fully enter. They remind us that intelligence is not always loud, not always quick, not always visible. Sometimes intelligence is a body listening. Sometimes it is a name carried through a low rumble. Sometimes it is a foot placed carefully on the ground. Sometimes it is the knowledge that someone who once answered no longer does. The earth is still there. The body is still there. But something has gone quiet. And for an elephant, that silence may mean more than we once knew. There are other minds moving through the living world in ways we are only beginning to recognize. Known Wild follows those hidden forms of intelligence, one species, one question, one world at a time. Subscribe to go deeper.